Everyone, and thanks for being with us today for what we expect to be a very exciting and insightful discussion. As we're waiting people to join us, we have prepared a quick activity. If you could use your mobile device or even personal computer, but mobile might be easier, to navigate to menti.com. It's written on my screen, menti.com, and use the code 3434339, and it will bring up a question for you. We have prepared a very quick activity for you to complete. And we're just going to give a few more minutes for people to join us. I see the numbers are going up. And let me see, has anyone started contributing? Yes. All right, great. We're going to create a word cloud, which we're going to share later with you. And let me introduce myself, since I just explained the activity. I'm George Konstantakopoulos, part of the FutureEverything team. FutureEverything is delighted to be curating the Innovate Manchester program on behalf of MIDAS and growth company Business Growth Hub. The events are part of a wider ERDF-funded program designed to facilitate innovative business collaborations across Greater Manchester. As people join, if you could navigate to menti.com and use the code that is on my screen, 3434339, and contribute to create a word cloud. And we're going to be starting in 1 minute. We have a very exciting panel of speakers with us today, and we are looking forward to have a very interesting and insightful discussion. All right, I see the word cloud is going great. All right, we will share this with you later. Now, let's wait no more. So I'm going to give a very quick intro of the Innovate Manchester program before we start. Innovate Manchester program is an ambitious program for Greater Manchester, combining events and workshops. We have shaped 4 themes, hoping to inspire cross-sector collaborative innovation by bringing industry, academia, and the public sector together. We're achieving this by raising awareness through our webinars, and in doing so, we are gathering challenges from large organizations. A key differentiator for the Innovate Manchester program is that we're not interested in simply talking about these topics. In 2 weeks, our Innovation Lab workshop, facilitated by FutureEverything team, will bring together teams to work upon specific real-life challenges. These challenges are submitted by large organizations. As we go through the webinar, you will hear more about them. Following the webinars, we enter a formation stage. During this process, we identify SMEs that can provide a solution to the challenges via an expression of interest registration process. The selected SMEs and large organizations are formed into teams and then are invited to our action-oriented workshop. Our purpose during these workshops and a core objective for the program is to shape solutions which have the potential to become tangible partnerships by empowering action to achieve cross-sector collaboration between large organizations, SMEs, and academia. Now, you heard me talking about challenges. Just to quickly give a bit of an understanding of what that is. What do we mean? Simply put, is a problem statement, anything that may provide an opportunity to innovate towards a creative or expert solution. It can be internal, external, related to your supply chain, or anything in between. We'll have the chance to talk about this a bit more during the workshop, during the webinar. Now, it's with a great pleasure that I'm introducing our chair for the day, Vikas MBE, which is former chair of FutureEverything, an entrepreneur and philanthropist based right here in Manchester. Vikas is also visiting professor at MIT Sloan in Lisbon and an honorary professor at the Alliance Manchester Business School. Vikas, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for joining today. It's great to see so many people have joined our event today. I'm going to just give you a really quick introduction for what we've got planned for you this morning, but also in the bottom of your screen, you'll notice a Q&A box. As all of our speakers and presenters are talking today, please feel free to put your questions straight into there. And then at the end of this morning's session, we're going to have a Q&A session, and I'll bring up your questions there. But the real aim of today is to actually look at what will be, the future of our cities and infrastructure. Now, it might sound a bit dull, but if you think about it, planning legislation, so when any of us want to build a new house or do any changes, or when the city wants to build something, the planning laws are really designed to make sure that ideally the public and the residents and the city and all the stakeholders have a say in what happens next and how things are shaped. Now we're at a really unique time. Technology is also coming in. So we're no longer just worried about, roads and buildings, but we're also going to be worried about how technology as this incredible new space will also shape our cities and our futures. And so today we're going to be talking about transportation, mobility, urban planning, construction, energy, and even the digital infrastructure that powers our cities. And so I'd like to start today by introducing our fantastic keynote, Professor Bamidele Adebisi. So he's a professor of intelligent infrastructure systems and the head of the Smart Infrastructure and Industry Research Group at Manchester Metropolitan University. One of his projects with SMEs won the overall prize for the best UK knowledge transfer partnership in September 2020. And he's also been part of multi-partner, multi-country projects, including the Innovate UK IoT Smart Cities project, CityVerve, the EU Horizon 2020 project on smart cities, microgrid energy management projects, and more. He's also currently working as academic lead on Nigeria's Intelligent Clean Energy Marketplace, and which is a £600,000 partnership to develop sustainable energy management systems for a community in Nigeria, and that's funded by DFID. We're really privileged to have you with us today. We're excited to hear your thoughts. So without further ado, I'll hand the screen over to you. Right. I think, yeah, perfect.
Can I be allowed to share the screen, please? Okay. Hello, can you hear me? Great. Thank you very much, Vikas, for that great introduction. Thanks everyone for joining in. In the time that I have this morning, I'll basically be sharing with us the experience that we've kind of acquired working with our partners of various sizes, from SMEs to large companies, and using our expertise in the area of Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, energy system, making a difference in real life environment, and showing how that has impacted in our city, the region, and internationally. Like I've been introduced, I lead a smart infrastructure research group within Manchester Met, and we have three core thematic areas: smart energy systems, connectivity, data analytics, and we have a group of people looking at engineering modeling and digital twin, applying that to smart cities and Industry 4.0 and so on. We are particularly good in using our derived findings and expertise underpinning Industry 4.0 kind of research, working in knowledge transfer partnership, which is usually funded by Innovate UK. And over the years, actually, we've been able to work with various SMEs. As a university, we have, as of July 2020, we have about 21 of those such projects, which makes us top 5 in the UK. And as a group, we have about 16 of these in the past couple of years, which is running to a few millions. And some of them have actually brought about first to market disruptive technologies, driving growth and creating jobs. A good example is working with a company in Rochdale, not far from Manchester, known as Aquacheck. So Aquacheck manufactures standpipe, mechanical standpipe. and our skill in IoT, wireless sensors, and GPS, we kind of transferred that to them in developing the world's first smart non-mechanical standpipe water meter. So this technology is not only able to tell you how much water you've used, it also gives you information about the location, about who is using it when, and we are also upgrading this in the future to be able to tell you about the quality of water, the content of that water, and the pressure within the network, which is, information that utility companies would like to have. This has attracted a lot of positive attention to this business. Obviously, the MD is now sitting on board of a top utility company, and they've been awarded a number of contracts. On completion of this project, we were ranked outstanding, and as a result of that, we were nominated for a number of awards. One of such is this award, so we won the top Best Knowledge Transfer Partnership of the Year in September this year. Also in CityVerve, we use our knowledge in IoT, working with partners such as FutureEverything, Siemens, Manchester Science Park, to build a connected Manchester over the Manchester corridor, connecting various assets. We have just recently completed Triangulum. Triangulum is a 29 million euro project funded by the EU, which was to demonstrate, disseminate, replicate a smart city with a focus on energy, mobility, and ICT. In the course of this, again, on the same corridor, we're able to optimize a few buildings. We bought electric vehicles and rented a few, and then we had a number of e-cargo bikes. All these connected on a central controller using ICT. One of these demonstration sites for Triangulum was our Bailiff campus, which is to us now a living lab, because this is a kind of what you can call a macrocosm of a smart city. It's small, but it represents what a big city we have. You have hall of residence of about 1,000 students, and in the middle you have a building that houses the lecturers, lecture rooms, and meeting rooms, and so on and so forth. And then just next to it, you have a energy center that has large battery, it has a combined heat pump and the rest. And then we have a car park with about 18 different charging units. So all these are connected together using intelligent system, and so we can perform research such as gamification and some intelligent demand response, which would have not been impossible without this project. Actually, as a result of this intervention and the PV, the batteries and things that we install an intelligence system, that building, Brooks Building, won the Public Building Energy Project of the Year in 2018. Internationally, we actually were funded recently by the Research Council to do what is known as peer-to-peer energy trading and sharing. This is basically Uber for energy. So you're able to share and trade energy with your neighbor. That's a £2 million given to us. And working with Oxford University, University of Bath, and Imperia in the UK, we partner with about 5 South Korean companies and universities to create this platform. And the knowledge that we acquired through this is now being transferred in Nigeria. So specifically, what we do in Nigeria is that we're trying to share energy between school, a very large school, and the houses around the school within the community. Using the peer-to-peer energy trading concept and some analytic predictive model, we've installed some PV on the school, we have batteries, and also the community. So in the evening when the school is kind of shut down, they can power the city, the community. And during the day when people in the community have gone to work and so on, the school can actually get energy from the community, which reduces the use of diesel generator. It increases access and actually helps in driving down carbon. The same concept also, we are working with QBots. By the way, QBot Energy is an SME based in Manchester, which is also working in this in the second project. They led the Nigerian one, and they are leading this Energy IQ, which we are working with other partners in Canada. This is funded by BASE. We're using artificial intelligence-based energy model to build a system that reduces CO2 on SMEs and helps them with flexible energy tariff. Again, this project is ongoing. I mean, what we've learned from these projects, and that's us and our partners from this project, and many some that have not presented, is the fact that you see the well-being of the citizen, quality of life is very important in the future infrastructure. That has to be at the center. It has to be at the very center of the design and the concept. And when that is clear, then of course you have the next layer, which is we acquire data, and this data, various data from different assets, from people, they are all connected using communication systems such as 5G. You have them on a platform, and that helps you to transform data to information. But that's not good enough. You correlate that with several other data so that your information become knowledge. But knowledge itself is not good enough. That knowledge is actually to help decision making so that you can optimize and control, and that is where you have wisdom. And you see, this, when you have all this in charge, then it helps you in informing decision makers. They are informed decision makers, not just people who are making decisions because it's something good for us, but because they have the right information. And that will help us in good health, in sustainable environment, and all the good things that we want. But I want to emphasize here that really at the heart of this again are the people. That really is not just about engaging people, it is about creating partnership with the people. We want people who are proactive. They're not just actively participating, but they are proactive. That we don't call the people users anymore. They're actually designers, because right from the conceptual level, they are part of the design. So they are part of the design and not just the users. And the whole decision is democratized, and the public is part of what do we install, where do we install it, how, for whom, and for what reasons, and all this. And of course, this will lead to good governance, I believe, sustainable environment, strong economy, improve outcome, well-being, and quality of life, which is what we all want. I think a good example of where this has been used, I believe it could be a lot better in the future, but it's been used. It's the recent report that came out recently, the Net Zero Decarbonization Report by the Net Zero All-Party Parliamentary Group. I mean, this report, I'll just summarize, it's basically saying the clock is ticking. You know, it's 2050, 30 years look like far away, but whatever we do in the next 5 to 10 years is going to make a huge difference. And by the way, this is already legally binding to everyone, something we have to do. And it has to be cross-party discussion. It has to involve people. We need to be thinking about circular economy. It's not just about designing, but can we recycle? Can we disassembly? Can we reuse? And also, we need just transition that incorporate everybody within the spectrum of the economy. The vulnerable, everybody within the economy need to be brought to the platform. And then on the other hand, that this is not just a competition between strong economy and good climate, that both of them are needed, both are required. That actually the benefit that we've derived from the pandemic COVID-19 actually can be capitalized on. We can turn COVID-19 as a springboard for stronger economy and for good climate, from the benefits of the behavioral change as a result of COVID, from walking and cycling, can actually be worked on, and obviously all this to create jobs. What does that mean to us, those in the Northwest, Manchester, in the next 10 years? Well, for example, there's going to be about 2.8 million low heating homes in the next few years. There will be about 60,000 electric vehicle charging. Building standard will be improved, will be changed to incentivize net zero. Ambitious hydrogen strategy, both for transport and for heating and cooking domestic. And that will include both blue hydrogen, green hydrogen, and all that. And then carbon capture will be at the center of this. This will be commercialized. And then the lots of investment, the number of jobs. And by the way, the jobs, the report says, it could be about 260,000 in the next few years. It actually mentioned that some of this would be, if not most, will be in the Northwest. We've also seen how this is being covered in the recent 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution by the Prime Minister only last week, covering the same thing that I've mentioned earlier. As I round up, as a university, we are working with our partner really in the area of research, because we think in getting people involved, every partner involved in this is crucial in decision making. Therefore, we are looking at smart city digital twin. a real-time model that will incorporate the city, factories, people within it, particularly the whole idea of hydrogen, all connected together, because we have a Manchester Fuel Cell Innovation Center within the university. We'll be working with our partner to create this model, which we take data from the real-life environment to optimize this so that we can make decisions that would be impossible to be tested in real-life environment. Finally, I just want to say, the future of our city in terms of smartness will be measured by the inputs it gets from the people. It's going to be how much the well-being and the quality of life of the people have been taken into account in designing and development of this smart city. To mention that this question has been asked a number of times, that, smart city, when are we ever going to get there? When are we ever going to say Manchester is smart? Well, I think smart city is a concept, it's a journey. It's something that incorporates human expectation, the challenges in the society, because all of this will involve our cities, will also involve. So maybe it's a journey that may never have a destination. So thank you for listening.
Professor, no, thank you so much for that. And I really love how you injected that piece at the end around our humanity and how that relates to smart cities. Even if we look at we've had some amazing engagement on our Menti word cloud so far, and the words that are appearing, most and people are using the most are exactly those. They're human words. It's about future, about green space, about people and transport. And, this is what makes a city. A city is not something apart from us. It is us. And I really thank you for your presentation. And, with that, again, I would once again encourage you to put questions into the Q&A box as you wish, and we'll come to those in the Q&A, and I'm sure we'll have a great conversation in that session in that part of today's session too. So next up, as has been the way through all of our events with Innovate Manchester, we're going to have some thought provocation. So we've got 3 fantastic speakers lined up for you. Jane Healy-Brown, who's Director and Town Planning Lead for the North West and Yorkshire for Arup. Dr. Binish Siddiq, who's the founder and CEO of AEH Innovative Hydrogel Limited. And John Corner, who's the Chief Digital Officer of the City of Salford. So we're starting today with Jane, and Jane leads the planning business at Arup's North West and Yorkshire offices. She oversees town planning, environment and transport planning in Manchester through there as well. She's a Greater Manchester Commissioner for Planning and Housing and regularly delivers lectures at the Universities of Liverpool and Manchester. She's a Fellow of the Royal Town Planning Institute and is one of the Northern Power Women. And we're really excited to have you with us today and really excited to hear your views. So welcome, Jane.
Thank you ever so much. And I'm hoping you can now see my screen. Please give me a nod, Vikas, if that's correct. Excellent. Good morning, everybody. And lovely to be with you, even if it's virtually today. Thank you for that introduction. Yes, I've got various hats that I have in terms of particularly Greater Manchester, but across the north of England, working with a number of our towns and cities. And in addition to the ones that Vikas mentioned, I'm also leading the delivery partner of the government's Towns Fund, which is working with 45 of the towns across Northern England, which is fabulous because I have to say at my heart, really, I'm a lover of towns and cities, looking at how they can innovate, how they're constantly changing. And so it's a great opportunity to be working with a number of them at the forefront of that. And within Arup is a multinational design business looking in engineering and in the built environment. We're UK based and an employee owned organisations who have really got that interest in the places that we're based. And my first slide is actually a picture of our founder, Ove Arup. It's my favourite one is the back of his head. I always like to think it's him looking forwards rather than looking backwards, but maybe in this world it's something we need to do a little bit of both. So I'm going to be talking today around the issues of sustainable cities and infrastructure, but really thinking about our sort of human-centred, resilient cities. So I think we've really had a challenge, particularly when we're thinking about urban planning and transportation and mobility. We've had a move, I think, recently in emphasis from the focus on environmental challenges and that period of economic challenges with austerity that's followed from that to a sudden period of social challenge, not to decry the others, but actually we're now suddenly in a COVID era, really focusing on this period of social challenge. And I believe this pushes forward the need for a more human-centered approach to how we look at our cities. And interesting, what's already coming out the word cloud seems to be reflecting some of that. So I'll be interested to see how that progresses. And in order to respond to this range of shocks that cities have to deal with, that city resilience needs to build in a broader response, and one that allows the human-centered side to come to the fore more often than perhaps it has done. But with the current era and what we're facing, there are a number of opportunities. And with that, particularly, there's an opportunity to experiment. And I think we've seen more experimentation in our towns and cities in the last few months than we've had previously. So, for example, temporary infrastructure around COVID testing centres, pop-up cycle lanes, let alone all the things that have gone from the change from office-based to home-based working. But as we look at a human-centered resilience approach, we need to look at what I think of as both the big stuff and the small stuff on infrastructure in a more balanced way. By the big stuff, I'm talking about major investments such as railways, but the small stuff, it's more of the community scale and perhaps the things that we feel as more human-centered. And as a huge part of this is about movement and how people move around cities. It's something that's been changing for quite some time, but this year has shown an increase in emphasis on the importance of that. And that's something that I would like to reflect on now. So as we think about human-centered movement around our towns and cities and how we can perhaps take advantage of this current period. So we've been doing a lot of work internationally and a really interesting work with Milan. And talking with Demetrio Scopaletti, who's the Director of Urban Planning in Milan, he explains that for decades, Milan, has, like many cities, has based its mobility strategy around traditional modes of public transport, building and expanding the metro lines, finding more ways of getting people into the city centre. And to quote him, he says, "We'd been conscious of the need for more walking and cycling, had introduced a congestion charge, but the approach was incremental. Yet after a few weeks of lockdown and empty streets, suddenly we have made progress on new bike lanes, nurtured parklets, which are parking bays used to expand restaurants or create mini parks, and all of it done almost overnight." And I think Milan isn't the only place to have responded at speed. We've been working with leaders in many of our global cities, in the US, in Europe, including in the UK. And there have been huge changes. Cardiff has been one in the UK that's really embraced this. Liverpool has been doing quite a lot around street closures, parklets. And we've been supporting Manchester City Council in looking at ways to improve pedestrian movements, particularly between the stations into the rest of the city centre. And the images you can see on screen are just one of the examples of where we've looked at how quite small scale interventions can really change how space is used in our cities and how it changes how people move around. But I'd say it's the speed of change and the chance to experiment that has been the difference in the last few months. But delivering change and maintaining these sorts of human-centered movement changes do have challenges. If we want to build on the advances that we've been able to make, I would advocate that there's a public relations exercise we need to undertake. We know, for example, that women and young people in particular are increasingly the ones that are switching to cycling and walking. We also know that travelling by bike and e-scooter can often be faster than by car or taxi for short trips. But do people necessarily understand the benefits? Are we really talking around benefits around not just speed of movement, but congestion, air quality, cost, carbon saving? But of course, any changes in how people move around will meet with resistance, and we have to understand that and not ignore it. You have to be ready for that resistance. And we have to be prepared to engage in that debate and recognise some people may be disadvantaged. So what are the future challenges? What is needed to keep transport and movement in our cities people-centred rather than private car dominated? The debate up until recently has very much been focused on a lot of the physical infrastructure, and we've made good progress there, but it is still evolving, and it does remain a challenge. But what I would suggest is what we need to be thinking increasingly about is that public relations piece. What is that behavioural change that we need to think about? And what, in terms of resulting in behavioural change, is needed, particularly around the role for digital technology to actually help that behavioural change? How can it help in nudge theory type approaches to behaviour? So, in conclusion, I would say we need to continue on the journey around the physical infrastructure, but we need to balance the big stuff infrastructure with the more human-centred infrastructure. But in order to deliver that, we need to understand how we can make better use of our digital technology, particularly to help us on that journey of embedding it through behavioural change. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Jane. And it's inspiring to see the approach that you're taking as well to the future of all of our cities. And as we know, entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial businesses are very much at the centre of this revolution. And so our next thought provocation comes from Dr. Binish Siddique, who's the CEO of AEH Innovative Hydrogel. So she worked as an R&D chemist at Hydrogel Healthcare, developed a whole host of new materials for industry applications there. She was awarded a PhD in materials from the University of Manchester in 2019, and also worked as a postdoc at the University of Birmingham. She's currently working full-time as the CEO of this innovative business, and she's really an exceptional and ambitious scientist, and she's won over £1 million of Innovate UK funding for her work, which is absolutely incredible. So next up today, Dr. Siddique.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Dr. Vikas, for your introduction. So if you just myself, Dr. Binish Siddique. I'm founder of AEH Innovative Hydrogel Limited, and the aim of this company is to become like Apple of agri-tech by solving the current problems that are faced by our agri-tech sector. So basically, as all of us are aware, that COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated the fragility of UK supply chain, especially for food. So basically, indoor farming. So our company is helping indoor farmers to grow crops in a sustainable way. So when I'm saying indoor farming, lots of people probably not aware of this term. So in indoor farming, you can grow crops without using soil. And most importantly, indoor farming allow us to grow crops that are imported from other parts of the world, for example, from warmer climate. However, the issues with indoor farming is operational costs. So currently, for example, 1 pound of latest green cost around £3, but our aim is, so our company is basically trying to reduce the operational cost to make sure that indoor farming is approachable for everyone. So just imagine, for example, once we reduce the operational cost, can we install the indoor farming in every building to make our cities more green and sustainable, and most importantly, Manchester more green. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. And it's actually really inspiring seeing this kind of work, through FutureEverything and other businesses when we're traveling internationally, particularly when we're looking at the MENA region. So many places in the world are sort of near-shoring their agriculture through innovative products like this. And so next up today is someone who I'm proud to call a friend, John Corner, who's the Chief Digital Officer of the City of Salford. I'm going to read you his incredible bio, but before I do, John, can I just say thank you for the 5G coverage we're getting here down the road from Media City. I was just checking before and I'm getting 320 megs a second, which is fantastic. So thank you for that. So John Corner is the Chief Digital Officer of the City of Salford. It's a strategic leadership role where he's able to inform city-wide digital transformation, planning, and build networks and relationships with central government and regional government too. John's responsible for actually bringing all those stakeholders together and has developed Salford's digital strategy, which connects business-led innovation and societal impact. It's a really, really innovative program and has created what's been called the Salford Innovation Triangle, with an emphasis on agile proof of concept work and across city stakeholders and businesses. He's also been instrumental in coordinating the 5G Innovation Hub at Media City, which partnered with Vodafone UK. And that's also been instrumental in Manchester and Greater Manchester becoming such a hub for this kind of work. He was previously chief exec at the Landing Media City, which I'm sure you're all aware of. And in his tenure, involved it into becoming the largest tech hub we have here in Greater Manchester for growth companies, innovation, technology, and talent. So with that, John, over to you for your thought provocation this morning.
Thank you, Vikas. Wow, very, very kind. And good morning, everybody. I've got a couple of slides, but I may not use them because I was so taken by the two previous speakers, inspirational comments from our two previous speakers, and that sense of the human-centered approach. I've been obsessed with this notion of sustainability, infrastructure, and smart cities now for several years. And when you look around the world, when you start to examine the overarching narrative, it's very much driven by technology. It starts very often with, hey, we've got this amazing bit of tech. Is it AI? Is it 5G? What is it? Is it connected vehicles? How do we push this technology through the supply chain? That focus on technology dominates the connected smart city agenda internationally. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it leads to a focus on command and control, on asset management, on how we manage physical spaces and cities. And what I've heard so far is flipping that. How do we actually deal with people, and what's happened? How do we support people? What's happened since COVID is that notion of connected smart city has really been quite exposed, I think, because being able to start with people and with problems is the central challenge really for all civic leaders and city leaders. And I think the next 5 to 10 years are going to be pretty lumpy and pretty transitional, quite frankly, because technology is not an issue or a problem. If you look around the world, you can see there are, I was in China last year, and there was a city in China, very similar size to Salford, about 250,000 residents. And they managed to connect the whole city using 5G, fiber, and Wi-Fi 6 on a ring. And they managed to do the whole thing in 4 months. But they've got a very different relationship between citizen and state. And I think the challenge for us over the next 5 to 10 years in the UK is not a technology challenge. It's a partnership challenge. How are we going to, if we're going to make our cities sustainable, and we're going to build infrastructure, and we're going to do some of the amazing things that our three previous speakers have just outlined, then we have to start developing new partnerships and doing partnerships in a different way, public sector and private sector partnerships. Otherwise, who's going to pay for this stuff? And we've seen that exposed during COVID. We've seen the gap between real poverty equating to digital poverty really, really being stretched. And that's a big issue. Actually, I will share my screen really quickly. I think we've got two minutes. I'll just see if I can put this up. So what have I been trying to do about that? This preoccupation with how do we create new partnerships? Well, I've created something called the Connected Cities Alliance. And I've spoken to multiple blue chip companies and global companies around the notion of what do you see as the smart agenda? And these 4 particular companies, Barclays, Siemens, Vodafone, CGI, shared the same human-centric approach, citizen-centric approach that I was thinking about. How do we start with use cases? How do we start with citizen-driven use cases and issues on the ground? And how do we work with those particular problems and with public leaders and stakeholders and SMEs to actually drive solutions? So this Connected Cities Alliance is now live, it's real, it's curated by Digital Salford, it's active in Manchester. We're working on environment cases, we're working on health cases, we're working on skills use cases. But all of these use cases have been driven by real world scenarios, real people and real actualities. And something nobody's mentioned so far is data. You know, that's going to be the real problem for us over the next 5 to 10 years. If we're going to build new partnerships, public-private partnerships to drive sustainability, to drive infrastructure in our cities, we have to find new and innovative ways of sharing data. So this Connected Cities Alliance is really trying to do two things. It is focusing on use cases, citizen-driven use cases for smart city enablement. But also in parallel to that, it's moving people into the space of what are those new partnerships? What are those new forms of public-private collaboration? And you can see that these large companies then create an ecosystem of SMEs, students, community foundations, civic leaders, actually coming together, trying to solve a problem. It's almost identical, analogous to what FutureEverything are doing in their design-led cases. How do you actually start with the problem and work your way towards a solution using that international outward facing? What are the best examples in the world that we can draw from? And these are some of the capabilities that we're actually focused on. And net zero and aging society are two of the big ones we're working on at the moment. And infrastructure and data are the two key issues really for the future business cases in the public-private space. We need to start thinking of our city assets, our physical assets, our street furniture, our buildings, everything as part of a network. And we need to start thinking about how we share and not hold on to data, not silo data, but how we share data in new ways that actually benefit society. I'll stop there.
Brilliant, thanks, John. And it is actually really fascinating to see, you know, just how much of a global leader Salford's becoming. And I think one of the most interesting and actually I think best parts of your approach has been to go around the world and see who's doing this really well internationally, because sometimes we forget that around the world, in Asia, in the MENA region, we've got brand new cities being built who are skipping past the Industrial Revolution straight into the digital revolution. So we're having digital first cities who are doing this really well that we can learn from, and they can also learn from us. So with that, I'd like to come into our panel discussion. And this is where I know we've had some great questions already in the Q&A box, so please feel free to put more questions in there as we go along and I'll come to them. But before we get to the audience questions, you know, as part of this program, we have a number of challenge partners, and one of our first challenge partners is Manchester City Football Club, which obviously will get a cheer from some and a boo from others. Now, after switching to reusables, for example, in their case, drinking cups, they found a brand new challenge came, which is, okay, now we have all these wonderful reusables. We have to find central facilities to clean and disinfect them. And it sort of really brings out this interesting question, which is, by moving towards sustainability in the first instance, it's bringing out new questions around infrastructure that we may need, that we may not have necessarily thought of. So, you know, I'd like to throw this open to the whole panel, but what are some of those hidden areas of infrastructure that you think that we might need if we're going to move towards sustainability? Professor, I think you went green there.
I didn't get the question. Well, what's the?
Yeah, so the question is, so obviously as we're moving towards more sustainability, so we use the example of Manchester City where they're moving towards sustainable drinking cups, for example. And in that case, they're having to develop a whole new infrastructure now to manage disinfection and so forth. And it does show us that as much as we have some of these visible aspects of sustainability, there's a whole infrastructure piece behind that we're going to need. So what are the kind of things that we might need to be investing in infrastructure wise to move towards a sustainable future?
Yeah, thanks. I think, you know, when, I know this may be a bit controversial, but actually maybe looking at us as infrastructure may help. Because actually you acquire data from buildings, from street lights, from everything, and then you want to make a decision of that, about that. But actually that decision in the end is for the citizen. And there's some of this data that you can actually digitize. So you're still dealing with senses, you're dealing with So basically, I think the answer to your question is to look at it holistically. And like I said earlier on, we democratize the process of selecting our leader. I think we can also democratize the process of selecting those infrastructure, because sometimes people don't do it deliberately, but it's someone who is on the table will be making a decision about what really suits them and people that look like them. But when it's democratized, then you see that more people on the table can cover more things which may have been overlooked.
Yeah, and I'd like to also just ask this to Jane and John. So yeah, Jane, please.
Thank you. I mean, for my perspective on this would be that actually having more data around changes allows people to have informed decision making, but it also allows collective responses. So it may be a response that you've talked about in that instance at Manchester City, but actually it could be something that other organisations nearby have similar challenges or indeed have the solutions. So it goes back to the point around having that holistic approach. And actually to enable you to have that holistic approach, there needs to be a better data-based understanding, which I guess is something that John can come to. And also thinking, for example, distribution and distribution networks. I think that's an area that's going to significantly change, particularly when you look around city centres. And actually that for a more sustainable based distribution and logistics network, again, it's the data around that to allow different businesses to come together to operate more effectively. Hopefully that gives you a bit of an intro, John.
Yeah, great.
I think Jane's right, actually. I think you need to give people data, and the CCA, the Connected Cities Alliance, is working on a carbon accounting project right now, and the challenge is not an individual one. Individuals, if you give them the data, they will respond, they will interact. The challenge is to get the different stakeholders who own that data to actually then corral it in some way. And I think that's the next needle shift for us in cities, and Manchester is doing brilliantly in that, especially in the health space, you know, with the single patient record. I think now we can take that model and move it into the environment space and say, okay, well, we've got so many organizations who've got bits of the jigsaw puzzle. If we can bring that data together and give it to our citizens, then they can start to say, well, you know, how do I manage my lifestyle? You know, what is my journey to work? Do I really need to buy all of these clothes? And start to say, well, that's the carbon outcome here. And I've got all that data in my smartphone. I can make a decision now.
Yeah, great. And Dr. Sadiq, I'd like to also come to you on this, because one of the really interesting parts of infrastructure is so much of the infrastructure that's critical for us is actually hidden. So I'll give you an example from our world. You know, one of our investments is one of the largest linen suppliers. Sounds like an odd small industry, but you know, we supply about a third of all the NHS supply chain through there. So you know, these are really big hidden industries, and agriculture and the agricultural supply chain is really important here. And so, Dr. Sadiq, you know, with the work that you're doing, do you think we're going to need new infrastructure for our cities with regards to our food supply chain, particularly if we're moving towards technologies such as hydrogels and permaculture and different types of agricultural culturing? Give it a second.
Basically, yes, new infrastructure we needed, but then probably this is not related to this question, but there are lots of hidden opportunities for food supply and everything. So there are lots of abandoned buildings, for example, in Manchester City. So when for example, when I came to Manchester, I saw there were lots of buildings that were not used for anything. So we can use, this infrastructure to build like okay, so we can use those buildings to install like vertical farms or anything like that, and then we can supply foods from those farms to like other cities or to like in Manchester. And in terms of like we also need to think like we need to invest in a new, for example, we are building up like lots of buildings, but we don't consider like whether these buildings have like about carbon footprints and everything. So if in every building we have some sort of like structure for vertical farms or anything, then it will contribute towards sustainability, and then it also make us like less reliant on food supply. And then obviously, for example, for hydrogel, the one we are developing, so our all aim is like to have manufacturing facility to supply this hydrogel to grow like crops in not only in UK but all around the world, to create jobs and everything. So this is something, I mean, we can do.
Yeah, no, thanks. And it is interesting because when you think about the fact that around 30% or so of all of the food grown is wasted in supply chain, you know, this could be an incredible way of making society more sustainable. I'd like to come, we've had a lot of questions through from the audience, and I'd like to come to those. So the first question is from Steve Connor, and you know, feel free, panelists, whoever wishes to take this. So Steve's question: Manchester has a Paris-compliant, science-based target to get to net zero carbon emissions by 2038, requiring a 15% reduction that we're currently failing to hit. What are the 2 or 3 radical innovations in infrastructure that we need to get Greater Manchester back on target? Great question, Steve. And whoever wishes to take that, please feel free to come in.
I can make a quick comment on that. I think it's a great question, actually. And I was talking to colleagues in GM about this recently. You know, if magically all the traffic in Manchester disappeared overnight and our air could suddenly become clean, we'd still have a real problem with our legacy housing stock. And so it's domestic buildings where we've got some real issues. And to hit that net zero target, we need new forms of policy and planning that starts to take infrastructure, IoT and connected devices into our homes, into our working with our housing associations to be able to manage heating, to be able to manage damp, to be able to help people to actually manage energy in new ways. I think that's an emerging conversation in Manchester, and we're pushing ahead on that agenda. I think that's a big challenge, not just for Manchester, but for all cities in the UK.
Jane, I saw you had your hand up there as well.
Yeah, John pretty much picked on the 2 areas I was going to, so I'll just do a small expansion on that. Looking at transport, looking at housing. My nervousness is, although I've talked about the opportunities we have in terms of changing our movement, is that in the COVID era, we'll have potentially a period where we have an increase in private transport because of a fear of using public transport. And that's something we have to be very, very mindful of. But I think longer term, the housing is our biggest challenge. We know that going forward, the vast majority of the homes people live in will be the existing homes, the existing buildings, and therefore it's not a new technology for new buildings solution, it's a retrofitting solution that we need. The government programmes and grant schemes around this really haven't hit the mark because they don't have sufficient return investment periods for that to stack up for households to make that decision. But as John mentioned, housing associations are a huge opportunity to start developing the technologies in this area, because they have that longer term investment in their properties. They get a different value back from it than private and individual householders have. And so that to me is the opportunity for experiments and to start to make the step change, but it has to then be something that can be rolled out across our housing stock.
Right. And the next question I'd like to come to, and perhaps it's one, Professor Adebisi, for you and for Dr. Sadiq, which is, and again, look, please, all panelists, feel free to chip in on this one as well if you wish, which is, so it's a question from Iram Kapan, and Iram asks, is it required to have a sustainable economy at the outset for us to move towards sustainable cities? Right. Professor, I can see you nodding, so maybe you could start.
Okay, so I think yes, because we need that optimism. At the end of the day, sustainable cities, the smart cities that I was talking about, it involves people and their well-being, And actually, strong economy is part of that. And if there is that feeling that this is actually impinging on my well-being, is affecting the economy, or is going to affect the NHS, it's going to be difficult to actually ask people to be involved in how you deploy this, how you test this out, and how you actually demonstrate it to the people. So I believe these are, I strongly support the idea of looking at this jointly and actually looking at them together as if they are one: strong economy and good and sustainable city.
I agree with you. So yes, so we need like to involve like people and to have like more smarter cities, green cities. And yes, I agree with this idea.
Great. And a question for John and Jane from Martin Shaw. And I'm picking on both of you because it's kind of quite policy related, actually. So Martin asks, given the wide range of stakeholders in the Northwest, property owners, infrastructure, connectivity providers, local and central government, the corporate and public sectors, how can we drive the type of change we need at the rate that we need, approaching what is more commonly seen in centrally run and centrally commanded economies? So Jane, I could see you nodding away, so I'm going to pick on you first.
It's interesting. I had a conversation with a colleague yesterday, and they said the centralized countries around China and the Middle East are going to be the places that actually have the first zero carbon cities, because they have a different obviously culture, but also centralized systems to make these things happen. And that is a huge challenge. And unfortunately, I cannot give the answers on that because it's about collaboration. And really, we need to have that trust between different sectors. And I have to say, in the UK at the moment, this is a sort of personal perspective, trust is extremely difficult because trust is based on respect. And I think we have a bit of a vacuum of that in many sectors at the moment, as we see what's happening at a national level. And until that's addressed, it's very difficult to do it purely on a collaborative basis. We therefore need to be looking at other policy and funding mechanisms to make that happen. And I think our centralised country in that regard actually counts against us. We're sort of caught between different systems. We aren't as centralised as the nations that will push forward on this, but we aren't sufficiently devolved as other nations like North America, where they can develop their own locally based solutions that can actually address some of those local issues in a more holistic way. So we need to address our systems, but ideally we need to address trust. But I think that is going to be a harder nut to crack.
Great. And John, I'd love to get your reflections on this one as well.
Yeah, I'm just busily writing down what Jane said. That was perfect. I totally endorse that. I think there is no magic bullet, Martin. It's a great question. There's no magic bullet. We're not a centralized country, and that's a good thing in lots of ways. But I think there is an appetite in government, a cross-party appetite actually, for needle shift, for what they call the moonshot challenge, and you can see that in the ambition around reduction in diesel emissions, as a starting point. So there is an ambition to how do we actually move this forward. But unless we actually start to build, as Jane said, trust and new types, new models, new business case models between public and private, we're going to go around in circles quite a bit, I think. And that's why the CCA, the Connected Cities Alliance, to me is almost that kind of, it's nudge effect. It's bringing together stakeholders around issues that they would not normally have met to work on. And that is, I think, that nudge effect will start to move people to see what the art of the possible is, and then to start to push for policy change, because it has to come through policy change. We could, some cities have tried in the UK to say, let's just build our own infrastructure networks and crack on with it. And straight away you run into state aid issues, and you'll know, chapter and verse on how that becomes a big blocker. And so we have to find a way of working with the market because the market wants to work with us. You know, the MNOs, the telcos are transforming themselves into service businesses. They are looking for those use cases. And at the moment, the use cases are coming through industrial IoT. We need to find a way of taking those models and transferring them to the civic space. And that will require some creative thinking around policy.
Wow, and Professor, if I can just extend this question and come to some of your work as well, because, you know, from what we've heard already, you know, a lot of this technology is going to become deeply embedded into all aspects of our lives as citizens in our towns and cities. But how does this mean that we need to change our approach to not just the actual security of that infrastructure, but how we as citizens interact with the security of that infrastructure? Because I know that's very much part of your work with smart systems in cities.
Yes, it looks like the whole answers to my question today will just be people, people, people. Interestingly, I think I was just thinking the other day, none of us will give our, you know, the PIN number to our cards to a stranger. We don't do that. I mean, the things that we don't do, but when it comes to the, you know, infrastructure and the city, we basically hand it over to others because we believe they are the experts. I think the way to address, you know, security, because again, remember, security actually is a measure of your well-being. So if anything is installed in your network that makes you feel less secure, that person has actually reduced your quality of life. So it's not helping you in any way. So I would say, you know, we treat our infrastructure, we treat the city like we treat maybe our eyes or maybe our arm. Does that make sense? Because when you treat it that way, you know, if somebody is going to poke something in your eye before it's, you know, far away, you're already complaining, you're already talking about it. You take that measure, that proactive approach really of saying, you know, I want to be part of it. I think the approach really is that in the past, it used to be the technologies come to us, and, you know, technologies is interestingly, I'm saying us now. So they come to the people and say to them, oh, this is what we're doing. What do you think about it? I think it needs to just be reversed to say, you know, people saying this is what we want. And because that's what I want, I've thought about all the different components that I'm interested in or the things that I don't want. And we have that debate right from design. Security is part of design. My privacy, confidentiality, and all those things are actually right from the concept, not the deployment. That's not when I should be talking about whether I like this or not.
Yeah, wow. And Dr. Sadiq, you know, extending this question of trust, there's definitely, you know, a sense that particularly when we're talking about things like hydrogels, or we're talking about, you know, modifications to crops and so forth, that there might be consumer resistance because they might see that as being technology modified or inorganic or slightly an antithesis to the current movements around food. Now, my personal view is I think technology is a vast improver to the quality and sustainability of food, but how do you feel we can also, you know, bridge that trust gap that the public have towards innovations like hydrogel and advanced agriculture?
This is an interesting question. So, for example, one thing, whenever I try to interact with people. So, firstly, I will just go with problems. I'm like, okay, there is a food like we are eating. So, for example, we need to think like when we have this food, from where it comes. So, for example, currently, agriculture contributes around 20% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So, why this is happening? Because we are using fertilizer, and so public need to aware about like these issues. So for example, when we are growing there is already issues. So we are using nitrogen fertilizer, lots of, and then they are just causing carbon dioxide emission, nitrogen emission. So these are the current issues. So with our technology, when we approach them, so we are saying to them, look, this is the new innovation, but it will reduce, like it will, basically it will reduce the greenhouse gases emission because it's based on like more the technology is based on more sustainable material. So with hydrogel, to be honest with you, the one we are using is based on more like food grade material, mostly based on sustainable things. So this is something we are trying to say benefits that are more than the if you grow by using like advanced technology, then there are more benefits and it will help like future generation. But the current way, like the way we are producing foods or anything, then it's just like, yes, apparently it seems like it's really sustainable, but then you need to discuss about the issues, and then they will be more happy to adopt new technologies if they know the benefits are higher than the current approaches.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to come to another audience question actually, and if you would allow, if the audience member would allow me to paraphrase a little bit. So Jonathan Abra, who also notes thanks for the presentations. He's raised a question about water, sewage, and drainage, which are often neglected as part of this discussion. And he was asking specifically about what areas of research are happening here. But I think this is an important one to raise because water, sewage, drainage, they're not kind of sexy parts of this future cities discussion. But as our cities are growing, this is an inevitable consequence. And I'd love to just ask all of you as panelists to get your thoughts on this, whether it's around the infrastructure that we need to be building, or indeed how technology can help us better manage our water, sewage, and drainage, because without that being right, our cities will not function.
So can I start?
Please.
All right. So I think for us, the work that we've done with Aquacheck in Rochdale is based on a standpipe, which is taking water from hydrants, underground water, and so on. And actually, the more we went into the research, the more we see that actually with one technology, when you fine tune it, you could do a lot more. Like I talked about the pressure of the network, water leakage, for example, it costs utility companies a lot of money. And how do we measure that? How do we monitor that? I think with the advancement in IIoT, which is Industrial Internet of Things, you are able to actually have more information about different aspects of the network. So I think what has been applied to just water, it can be applied to sewage, where I believe even during the pandemic, in the first lockdown, there were research even being carried out that's linking the COVID-19 with the sewage one way or the other. And you can see how the more data you can actually acquire, the more you are able to make an informed judgment. So I believe it's no brainer really applying the IoT, artificial intelligence, and into this area. And I have a colleague at the University in Computing that actually looked at this in the past in terms of applying artificial intelligence to sewage and water network.
Great. Jane.
Thank you. As a planner, I can get very excitable about these issues, as planners often do, about the unsexy aspects of our cities. But I think what we're finding is there are increasingly developers who are understanding the need right up front to think about these parts of our infrastructure as they're planning their sites. It's not consistent across the piece. I'm thinking of two examples I have at the moment. One where the drainage strategy is actually the framework upon which everything else is built, whereas I have another one where it needs to be doing that, but it's like getting blood out of a stone, quite frankly, trying to get the developers to realise that actually they need to consider that before any other design features because of the nature of the site. But we've also worked across Greater Manchester in particular, looking at the infrastructure framework strategy. I'm working with a lot of the infrastructure providers. And I think the infrastructure providers are moving into a new place in that they are starting to better understand what the development industry needs and what the public sector needs, so that they can be better planning and better collaboration as development comes together. But one of the challenges there goes back to a challenge that we've been talking about already this morning, but is around having data and having around shared data, so that we can actually have that understanding of what those sorts of physical infrastructure needs are now and projected into the future as well.
Great. I'm not sure if any of our other panelists want to come in on this one, and if not, I'll move to our next audience question.
I'll make a quick comment, Vikas.
Please.
Just a quickie. water's an interesting one. One thing I've noticed over the last few years is the utilities companies are more open to innovation and working with SMEs and running their own accelerator programs. And I think that's a really interesting direction of travel. So that openness to new ideas, new tech, and working with emerging companies, I think, is positive. And there's some great examples we could talk about. There is also a connection between water usage and health, and there's some fantastic work going on in Salford and Manchester around, looking at water meter data and then overlaying that on vulnerability. If people are not using water, then there's something wrong going on and that's really simple sharing of data. Mrs. Jones in number 11 has not flushed the toilet for 2 days and has not boiled a kettle. There's no water being used, so let's get in there and help. So that those sharings of data around from utilities and health is quite interesting. So I just wanted to make those 2 quick points.
Great. And there's a question that's come in here from Paul Jarman, and so Paul Jarman's question is, it seems that the big shifts in the past have been the result of financial incentives or regulation. And Paul says, is it too cynical to say that significant parts of the economy, whether it's private landlords or businesses, will only change if they can profit from it or are forced to by regulation? And I think this is a really important point, which is, do we have the financial incentives to allow these big leaps in innovation to take place? So whoever wants to take that question first, please feel free.
Yeah, I'll dive straight in on that one. And Paul, you're not being cynical. There's a big dollop of realism in there. At the end of the day, our partners, our private sector partners, are not charities. They do want to make a profit. Having said that, they are in the process of transformation. They know that the world around them is changing rapidly, and then they're evolving their business models. And partnership and collaboration are front and center of those business models in ways they've not been before. So we need to start moving away from that old-fashioned procurement model and start looking at solution models. We have to in our city stop saying, how do we go out to the market to fix X, Y, and Z? And before you even start that process, you've got to write the answer into your procurement framework. So there's no innovation there. There's no real partnership. There's no solution item. So I think there's some opportunities in there, but we don't have financial incentives at the moment. So we've got to develop new business cases and new ways of using the funds we have in smarter ways.
Great. And Jane, please.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think John's right. There's an awful lot that we could go into around procurement on this, and I know some of the comments have related to procurement, and that is a huge conversation in itself, but it absolutely addresses that point. But a point that often I don't think is talked about is, yes, it is important that private sector businesses are commercially successful. And I talk about this from coming from an organisation at Arup, as I mentioned in my introduction, that is employee owned. And as an organisation, we have to be commercially successful to survive. But within that, we don't have our shareholders. We are owned by the employees, and therefore any profits go back to the employees, invest in our research and invest in our charities. Now we're starting to see that choice and that philosophy is really helping us in terms of our recruitment and retention. And I know a lot of companies are starting to move in that direction, but it is by far the minority. If we can perhaps start more of a conversation around some of those employee benefits and career benefits for people, particularly as we see a millennial generation that isn't perhaps more interested and embedded in that way of thinking, that may be a bottom-up approach to addressing some of those issues.
And I think I'd like to just bring in Dr. Sadiq on this, because, as the CEO of an entrepreneurial business, do you, as the leader of an entrepreneurial business, feel that you have sufficient incentive to do this and to innovate? Do you feel as if the opportunity is there where you could scale because of the incentives that are in place?
Thanks. I think as a CEO, there are lots of challenges I have faced in that things. There are less incentives and everything. If you want to do something, if you want to innovate, so there are lots of challenges behind. But Fortunately, overall, I mean, if I say like there are lots of, for example, Innovate UK, they are the one like they are investing, they are like providing you financial things so that you can innovate. But overall, I mean, I feel like there are still lots of challenges in this regard.
Yeah. And actually, I think this is one area where transnational and cross-government and cross-nation collaboration is really important. I mean, to give you one practical example, one of the most effective incentives that the world could apply relatively straightforwardly would be good universal carbon pricing and allowing carbon to be traded more effectively globally as a way of stimulating renewable energy. That's just one of thousands of examples. I'm conscious of time as well, because George has asked me to make sure I hand over to him by 10:50, and I don't want to get beaten up virtually. So I'm going to do a bit of a roundup question for the panel, and I'd love you to all give your reflections. Which is obviously, on the call today, we've got people from academia, from business, from all sorts of sectors. But, if you were able to have, whether it's a policy wand or an innovation wand, what are the one or two most important changes that you think we need to make right now? Or one of the one or two most important steps that you think we need to make right now towards building more sustainable cities and futures? So whoever wants to come in first, please do.
I'll dive in, Vikas. Never shy of talking about the things that I'm passionate about. If you look at what's going on in industry, if you were leading a blue chip company, you would now be thinking about your operating model. You would be looking at software-defined networks. You'd be looking at how you can slice networks, how you can build your own national or international network to actually streamline your business, drive product efficiencies, and connect all of your employees. And that conversation is going on right now across most of leading organizations around the world. So the one thing I'd like to do is to look at those technologies, that network slicing opportunity, that ability to software define a network, and say, how do we apply that to distributed health? How do we apply the exact same industrial thinking to actually supporting vulnerable people? And how do we build homework hubs for our distributed schools? How do we connect families to be able to actually be skilled for the future? And using those industrial techniques and applying them in a social impact setting, to me, that would be the big change that I would love to see over the next 5-7 years.
Thank you. And perhaps, Professor, we'll come to you. I'll work my way around the screen as you appear on it.
Right. I was, from research perspective, I'll say to my academic colleagues that over the years, we've done a lot of researches in the lab. Well, the future is maybe not so much in the lab, it's in the city. We're talking about smart infrastructure and the city here. So we need to move the lab actually to the city, where we engage with people, we engage with the citizens, and actually know what they need, what we need for the future, and work together. What I'm saying here is that it's no longer going to be a smart IoT person or somebody who is working in the area of AI. Is multidisciplinary, people from psychology working with economists, working with technologists, and everyone coming together actually, because it involves all aspects of our life. So it's multidisciplinary challenges. So the approach needs to be multidisciplinary.
Great.
So
and then next up
on,
thank you. And next up on my screen is Jane, and then Dr. Sadiq.
I'm going to put two suggestions forward. One, perhaps higher level, and then a second, which I apologise, and it may in some ways sound a little flippant, but hopefully will be somewhat serious. So the first one is, I think, going back to my presentation earlier, is trying to shift that public sector culture to be one which is more around experimenting and trialling and doing things, as we've seen in recent months, on a temporary basis, being prepared to fail, but being prepared to experiment. And that experiment, whilst engaging with communities, is the opportunity to increase the pace of change. My second more practical one is shoes. And going back to what I said about trying to encourage people walking and cycling more, we have a real issue about the design of workplace shoes. They are not designed to encourage those behaviours. We've talked about behavioural change, we've talked about big investments in infrastructure, but actually, particularly for women, but I think for men as well, that could be a fundamental change. And I cannot believe I've concluded what I'm saying by talking about shoes.
I'm going to have to get onto my factories immediately on that front. And Dr. Sadiq.
So from my side, there are also two suggestions. One is about like our attitudes towards innovation. So for example, in UK, what I have noticed, like we need to change, if there is any innovation that has ability to change the world, there need to be do investment. So from, for example, in USA, so why there is a Silicon Valley, there are lots of investment that is going on. But here in UK, you have really good innovation. There is a small SME, they want to change world, but investment from government, yes, there is a lot of investment from governments, but still there is more investment needed if we want to innovate, if we want to make if we want to make cities smarter and greener. So I will say basically we need to take risk about like innovation. And secondly, as a public, we need to think like about everything. So what we are consuming, for example, I think earlier someone already discussed. So when we are buying something, is it in sustainable way? So that produced in sustainable way, and same for like food, how distance that food travel from other countries. So is it like, does this contribute towards greenhouse gases emission? So in general, overall, like public, we also need to change like our behavior towards like what we are using, especially for foods and everything.
Thank you. And before I hand back to George, if I can just take a moment just to thank all of the panel. It's been absolutely inspiring hearing you and hearing your answers to the audience questions today, and also just just really practical things that I think we as a society can do to move forward, and how lucky we are that Greater Manchester and the cities that make up the Greater Manchester and Northern region are pioneering the way with this. So thank you to our panel today. And with that, I will hand back to George. "2020 phrase, you're on mute."
Thank you, Vikas. Yes, I know. So such an exciting discussion. Just want to share my screen and go through the next steps really for people that are with us on what they should be expecting. So as discussed in my intro, we have an innovation lab workshop that is upcoming that is going to take place on the 8th and 9th of December. It's pretty much in almost 2 weeks, between 9:30 and 12. That would normally be a full day workshop, but due to circumstances, we need to do that over a virtual delivery. So we are inviting large organizations to share their challenges. You can email info@midas.org.uk by Monday, 30th of November, and share your challenge. We are actually going to be looking for SMEs to express an interest, as I previously mentioned, on these challenges. And you need to be checking your emails today. We already have on board some challenges like the Manchester City Football Club. And you are going to be receiving an update to register your interest today. And we are going to invite you by Wednesday, 2nd of November to, that's when actually the registration is going to close. And we're going to update SMEs as the teams are formed. So all this process is taking place in the background. The moment that a team is formed, we're letting you know, but you will hear back from us no later than Friday, 4th of December. Now, for each SME that is going to be eligible, as I said, the Business Growth Hub, Growth Company, and MIDAS are on board. Specifically the Business Growth Hub, which is supporting SMEs. For each eligible SME, there will be an advisor allocated to them to guide them through the process. All this support is fully funded in order to help them develop and progress these innovation opportunities. And they have a team of expert advisors tailored with a tailored plan to help them develop a tailored plan of action to accelerate the development of new products and services. And we hope these innovation labs actually will help you do that. And there is the innovation voucher scheme, which is providing £5,000 available to help SMEs gain access in special expertise and research facilities. So he's trying to combine also the academia. Now, if also you want to register your interest, you need to visit business BGH Innovation at growth.co.uk. Now, we have asked you earlier to go through the menti.com platform. So before I switch off, I would like to show you the word cloud that we have created, which is a really interesting combination of words. We can see central there, green, transport, energy, trees, people, and the future. Such an interesting word cloud. We're going to share this on the social, if you look over our social media accounts. And we've also asked you about the future of our cities. And who do you think should be part of the decision-making process? It's really great to see our attendees suggest that it should be between the local authorities and citizens. I'm personally very happy to see citizens take the second place, if it's not the first, as an integral part of the decision-making process. Obviously, academia and local SMEs should be part of that too. So we will share this via social. And before we close, our next event, which is going to be around the future of human experiences and human-centered design, a theme that has been mentioned a few times throughout the webinar today. It's taking place on the 10th of February 2021. And the Innovation Lab is going to be taking place on the 24th and 25th of February. If you want to put these days down in your calendar. Again, the email for MIDAS, if you're going to get in touch and express an interest ahead of time, that is info@midas.org.uk. And I want to thank you all, Professor Bamidele, Jane, John, Dr. Benice, and especially you, Vikas, for chairing such an excellent discussion, for all of your contributions. And we look forward to work with you again in the future. Thank you very much.